Now we are going to start the decision making in managerial accounting. So there are so many decisions that you can make in managerial accounting, like whether to make this product or that product, whether to make the some of the parts in-house or to outsource it, means buy it from some external supply, and so much more. So before starting that, we do need to get familiar with some of the basics. So first of all, we need to talk about what do we mean by a relevant cost. Now, there are many ways teachers teach this, but I don't really agree with most of the ways that it's taught. Because the problem is, like, if you take shortcuts and you say this is a relevant cost, always think this is a relevant cost, those are good things to know, which I'll also tell you. However, you should know exactly what a relevant cost is as well. So, what is a relevant cost? So, I would say relevant cost is any cost that is a cash cost, future cost, and it is incremental to the decision that you are making. Means it depends on a decision that you're going to make. So what do I mean by cash cost? Means it has to have some money value. Like if it's like a let's say emotional cost, of course that's not we cannot categorize that in accounting. So it has to be cash cost, means it has to have some financial value. It has to be a future cost, means it hasn't happened yet, I am like I'm going to incur it in the future. And it has to be incremental to decision, means it has to be up to you whether you want to make this decision and spend the money, or make this decision and not spend that money. So you are deciding whether to spend that cost or not. So that's kind of what we mean by relevant cost. Now let me try to make it a little bit easier process for you. So we already talked about variable costs and fixed costs. So I'm going to put this into that framework so it's a bit easier for you to understand what I mean by these. So first, let's talk about variable cost. We know that variable cost is any cost that happens for every unit you produce, right? So for the level of production. So in this case, when I'm saying variable cost, usually we can say variable cost would be relevant because if I do make the product, I have to spend the money. If I don't make the product, I wouldn't be spending the money. So for the most of the variable costs, these are relevant. Almost all of the variable costs are relevant. Now, again, the idea is variable cost by definition happens for everything you do. It doesn't have to always be there. If you don't do that thing, you don't have to spend this money. So that's kind of why variable costs are almost always relevant. Why I'm saying almost, because there are some specific things that are not relevant, but that's not at the moment. That shouldn't be your concern. Then fixed cost. Now, this is where students make a lot of mistakes when we talk about the fixed costs. Now, fixed costs, of course, by definition, we know fixed costs are costs that do not change with the level of production. However, you have to divide the fixed cost into two different parts. There's something called avoidable fixed cost. Let me give you an example. Uh, how about let me first write the other one, which I think you know is unavoidable, then I'll give you an example for both of those. Okay. So let me give you example of avoidable fixed cost. Like how can a fixed cost be avoidable? Very simple. Let's say you have a shop, you know, and it's under like one huge building. In the shop, you have three sections. So you have, let's say, the uh, clothing section, you have the shoe section, and then you have, let's say, um, we can pick so many things. Let's say you have some random, let's say, um, hat section. I don't know, like if that's the correct division, but let's assume that. So we have a clothing section. Of course, hats will be there, but let's assume this. We have a clothing section. You have the shoe section, and then you have the hat section. But rather, let's just make it equipment section. Let's just say, right? So you can buy sports gear and everything. So that's a gear section, let's say. Again, just to make sure, because we talked about two things. So we have the clothing section, then we have the shoes section, and then we have the gear section where you can buy a lot of equipment and a lot of items. Okay, so now let's assume each of those sections has their own supervisor. And of course, supervisor would be on a salary. So we know salary is a fixed cost. So this area, let's say clothing section, has their own supervisor. The the shoe section has their own supervisor, and the gear section has their own supervisor. So if I get rid of the gearing section, I also wouldn't need the supervisor either, right? So that fixed cost of the salary of the supervisor is a avoidable fixed cost, because it's in my decision whether I want to spend this money or not. Because if I keep having that department, or rather section, I would have to keep paying the supervisor the salary. And if I remove this section, I wouldn't have to pay that salary at all. So that's kind of what we mean by avoidable fixed costs. So yes, now hopefully you know fixed costs are sometimes avoidable. So please remember, avoidable fixed costs are relevant because they depend on your decision. You can decide whether you want to spend this money or not. So you have to take that into consideration. However, unavoidable fixed costs are irrelevant, means ignore them in any decision. Don't consider them at all. Doesn't matter if it's $1,000 or $1,000,000. Ignore the unavoidable fixed costs, because doesn't matter if you make this decision or that decision, you'll have to pay that money anyways. So why care about that? You want to make the best decision for things you can control. It's like the game of chess. Like even if you're in a worse position, like you're losing, you have to make the best decision in that case. You cannot consider, okay, I cannot win, so let me just do whatever I can. No, no, no. Even if you're in a worse position, you have to make the best decision to lose the least amount of money. So that's also where these decisions actually help you quite a bit, because this is not always about making more money, because usually they are, but sometimes you're in a horrible position. You can lose $1,000 or $500 on a decision. So you obviously will go to the losing $500. So I hope this is clear. And let me just define a couple of more terms, and then we will start the actual decisions. So there's something called opportunity cost we have to define here. Now, for those of you who have already learned economics, you would know what opportunity cost is. Opportunity cost is basically to do something, you're giving up doing something else, right? So that's what opportunity cost is. For example, when you're taking this course, the opportunity cost might be you watching a Netflix movie or something, you know? So you're giving up watching Netflix movie to watching this course. So to be precise, because in accounting we have to be number oriented, you have to say the best next alternative given up. Means if you obviously we are going to assume we're going to choose the best possible scenario. The second best scenario you're giving up is your opportunity cost to be able to do the best thing. Opportunity cost is all not always there, but sometimes it is. Means to make this product, I have to give up making that product, and that's opportunity cost. We'll talk about that. Don't worry about that at the moment. I just needed to tell you what opportunity cost is. It's the best next alternative given up. And the last thing we need to talk about before we move on to the actual solving is sunk cost. Now, if I want to put it technically correctly, I would say sunk cost is any past cost or any cost that has already been incurred. Means it is not up to you that you want to incur this cost or not. By the way, incur means it will happen. So, but for our purposes, even if you just think of sunk cost as any past cost, that works. I mean, like that doesn't really affect us that much. But just to let you know, the full definition will be past cost or any cost that has already been incurred. Means, for example, if you have already entered into a legal agreement to rent the building for 3 months, now that 3 months worth of rent is a sunk cost because you've already incurred that, like you cannot now change that. You are already entered into agreement. You have to pay that money regardless of what you decide. So that's why please remember sunk costs are always irrelevant cost. Irrelevant. Always. Because if I cannot control something, why should I worry about that in my decision making? It will happen this way or that way. I should just make the best decision for the factors I do control. Similarly, opportunity cost is something we are giving up, means we are losing out on to make one decision over the other. This is of course always relevant. You always have to take into consideration, if I do this, what am I losing out on? So that's your opportunity cost. So I hope all of that's clear. I try to summarize it as much as possible without like compromise